how do you balance being a medical professional and a musician?
Yeah, it'd be great if I had the answer to that question.
You're like, I don't, actually.
I don't. I struggle and I figure it out, which I think is like, taking out the illusion, a mirage that I have it all figured out. It's like, no, it's a struggle.
How's it? And welcome back to another episode of Cha Chat, where we have a chat over cha. My name is Sapna, and I'm your host. And today I'm joined by an incredibly talented musician and naturopathic physician, Bars. He does an amazing job in both his medical practice and in his music, and melts east and west. Please welcome Frank Song Jr.
Thank you. I was about to start crying during that. I was like, don't look at me. No, I'm going to cry.
You're going to cry already?
My little Asian, can't take compliments.
Yeah, fair. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is amazing. To be here now.
I know.
Sure, you'll tell people how we met and everything.
Yeah, for sure. For people who don't know, we were both part of something called ACN, which is the Asian Creative Network, which is a thing that started as a Facebook group. I think it still only exists on Facebook.
I think so.
Yeah.
But it was everybody who was Asian and creative in the US was and then they had little cities that ACN LA, ACN New York City.
It started in ACN New York though.
OGs.
ACN
we are the OGs.
We are the OGs, the golden era of ACN.
Truly.
We're up in here.
Yeah.
I want to start with medicine.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to being a naturopathic physician? Why that?
Oh, wow. That's a whole story.
That's what we're here for.
So, I think that growing up Asian American, there was a set path, and I was doing the pre-med, pre-sciences, all of it, high school, magnet research programs, all this stuff. I went to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. Mm-hmm. And I think my mind, I grew up, straddling two cultures already. So I did grow up with both types of medicines. You don't go and get medications for flus and colds or go to the white coat Western doctors.
Exactly.
Your grandma takes care of things and she has a knowledge of herbs and how to adjust your lifestyle during that time, how to adjust and live with seasons to prevent, and it's prevention too. But so I kind of grew up straddling them, but I didn't really see them as something merged. And then I was hit by an SUV while crossing a crosswalk in my first year of undergrad. Mm-hmm. Was in pre-med things, and then had to go through that journey of bodily injury. I had head trauma, fractured hip, whatever, all these things. And I think that obviously I have a lot of appreciation for Western medicine because emergency-based medicine, immediate care, EMS systems, all that stuff, I was able to survive the acute injuries. However, the follow-up care was definitely something that it was my first time experiencing. What is it like to then not have your psychological health be taken into consideration or your recovery or nobody helping me adjust my lifestyle or figure out what happens now after this. Mm-hmm. So subsequently, I ended up seeking out different types of care. Not only did my family provide some of that, my mom immediately put me on herbs that are supportive to blood building, bone building, nutrition, eating more collagen and bone broth, bone-based things. And I found myself in a clinical nutrition practice, and then I did an internship there, and then discovered that there was this whole field of naturopathic medicine and naturopathic doctors, and there were at that time about 4 or 5 certified naturopathic medical schools. They're 4-year programs. Your first 2 years are very much conventional MD medical training. You do your histology or pathology or blah, 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 and then the cadaver lab. But then we get trained more in nutrition and physical-based medicine, more community-based care, not meant to end up in the hospital, as a hospitalist, but more as generalist generalist medicine. So that's how I got into it. It was because of my own injuries and then having to seek out care that wrapped around more holistically. And it was working with naturopathic physicians and more holistic practitioners. I think it was the first time that people, a provider created a safe enough space to talk about my history with sexual assault, my I wasn't out yet as gay at that time either, and that really informs what kind of care you should get, you know, in terms of all of it. So I just thought to myself that there's this field that it's going to be a challenge because there's still much stigma around this type of medicine in the US, but it really helped me understand. I was like, I believe this because I grew up in it culturally, you know? So why wouldn't I embrace this and utilize both? And it's integrative and at the end of the day, and depends on where you practice and all those things. But I definitely consider myself an integrative practitioner. I use the Western pharmaceuticals when I need to, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done around it.
Yeah. Exactly. I feel like people don't realize it's not one or the other, and that the two often can work hand in hand with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, my father's an Ayurvedic physician, so I grew up with Ayurveda, and
it's amazing.
Starting with that first, before the same thing, before like for a flu or a cold, instead of being put on antibiotics, you know, we have like herbs and teas and things like that. But then for more severe things, like, yeah, absolutely, Western medicine has its place and can help, you know? So I feel like people can often demonize one or the other. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be that way. And there's a lot of wisdom in it that can be rationalized through our understandings of like our scientific understanding of nature and physiology and climate and food and nutrition and I don't know, just like the molecules that are all around, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what do you specialize in?
Yeah, so after naturopathic medical school, I was able to get a residency position in Vermont to train under a Lyme and tick-borne disease specialist who was doing public health work, triaging in a primary care setting out of family medicine practice. So I went up there and I just dived into 2 to 3 years of the residency. Official residency was only a year, but I stayed, got a full-time position and just also needed more training still. And I did Lyme and tick-borne diseases. So ticks are an arthropod that, arachnid, that is in the New England area and all over the U.S. But this is the red zone of the endemic disease. And these arachnids, arthropods, and I stray away from insects because it's a misconception that they're like bugs, but they're not really insects. They're actually arachnids, which is just a little entomology nomenclature or whatever. But they essentially dig into your skin. They have these this mouthpiece, and then they have barbs and they dig into you and then they suck your blood or ingest your blood. But in that process, they can carry infections that range from bacteria to protozoas to viruses, and that they've picked up from other small mammals. The largest population is white-footed mice, and then they transfer that to you. Wow. So the one that everyone knows about is Lyme disease, so the Borrelia species. And that is becoming a huge issue because it's not, some of our testing technology is, was developed in the 70s, being refined, but there hasn't been much funding in it. So it's not a perfect testing. Like a procedural testing is not great, that a lot of people get misdiagnosed, a lot of people don't get diagnosed. And then that's not even saying people who get multiple infections.
Right.
So that's what I specialize in. I did that training and I treat that holistically, both, and I work with the pharmaceuticals and the herbs, and then also just figuring out like general inflammation. Why is your immune system susceptible to taking on this infection, especially for those who have more chronic, complicated presentations of this infection?
Yeah.
That's what I do when I'm like, code shifted in that sense.
Right.
And then I'm just like a musician.
Yeah. How do you balance being a medical professional and a musician?
Yeah. It'd be great if I had the answer to that question.
You're like, I don't, actually.
I don't. I struggle and I figure it out, which I think is like, taking out the illusion, a mirage that I have it all figured out. It's like, no, it's a struggle. I think that balancing it wise, when I was doing medicine full time or when I was in naturopathic medical school and I was in residency, it wasn't necessarily a balance. It was that like I just needed to do music to manage my stress, manage the things that I was thinking about. I started residency in COVID. I was starting to learn about Lyme and tick-borne diseases and how it interfaces, and it is increasing because of climate change. And I have to just like ingest all of these truths and realities. And what does that mean for me as like in my 30s, like this next generation of, having this desire to like do good in the world or help in a way, I had to use music to like clarify my thoughts or process my emotions around it, because there's so much anger and frustration. Or I've been on the phone trying to get this patient insulin for another physician for like however many hours. Like, why is our system like this? All of these questions I just always turned to music. So it was more out of necessity. In terms of now switching from full-time medicine to part-time and then going full-time music, I think being a musician and an artist, it's a lot more, the scheduling is a lot more open and amorphous. And as someone who's had a lot of structure in my life, it's hard to balance, because for the first time I get to decide what to do. And you realize you're not really good at doing that when you've been told what to do for most of your life, or there's a general sense of like what you should do, and so you can make decisions based off of that. But to like become an artist and feel the imposter syndrome of like, my words and my thoughts and my narrative or my story is worth telling and worth promoting, and like on social media be like, listen to my stuff, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, it's different. So,
and you're an independent artist as
am.
well.
Yes.
And I feel like with independent artists and having to deal with the whole social media thing, do you ever feel like people care more about you if you have a following, or if you have like views, or it's become more about analytics? Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. I think that the way the industry and art industry, music industry, record labels, they almost, I think, are looking for the artist to have already built a following. Right. Because, they're looking at artists not for their art per se. I mean, I'm not saying that's everywhere, right? It depends on the majority, I think, are like industry in the sense that they're looking to make an investment on an artist. And if that artist has the ability to create that return because of their following, and they can market upon that or do PR on something already built, they'll do that, and that's worth their investment. I mean, I don't know. It's capitalism. You're just like, we see patients as like wallets, and then we see artists as also like generating income for the organization. And I think that I see it in terms of its role in our system, but I see it on an unhealthy level and impacting actually the work itself, both in healthcare and as an artist, like artists not being able to survive or having to do these things to become inauthentic to what they actually want to say in order to be palatable and like marketable to the mass, which is, I don't know, Taylor Swift fans. Oh, don't sue me, Taylor.
I feel like I've definitely spoken to a lot of other musician friends as well who've talked about just like how frustrating it can be sometimes, where if they are seeking a label, the label cares about, how viral their music can get. It's more about virality rather than the quality of their music.
Right.
And I feel like that can be just...
Yeah, streaming has made it that way too, right? Like people aren't buying physical albums.
What did Beyonce say? People aren't making albums anymore.
Yeah. I've actually like just recently been like, I was planning a couple EP releases and then maybe an album, and then one friend sent me this like actually informative post about changing your technique to just releasing singles because it's not worth it to you. And I think I've decided that I am going to just release that singles, like let people know it's a full EP, but release as singles because and I've been encouraged not to do marketing before I release because because our attention spans and the way people interface with the social media applications, if it's not like available right there, then it's like they don't keep it on their radar.
Yeah, you'll see so many songs that go really viral on TikTok, but they're not out yet. And then they're released like a month or two later and people are already tired of it.
Yeah.
So
so changes in strategy, you release it and then you market it. Whatever.
All of that.
So it's, we're just, these techniques are just reflecting where the industry and where it's going. But anyways, I'm not happy about it. I'm like, let me just release it. Like, I care more about like the project itself having like, releasing as one means it's like a story.
Yeah.
But, you can also do it like, I do see it in the sense, I've been watching Agatha all along.
Me too.
Oh my God, it's so good.
I'm so obsessed. Yeah.
And I do like the whole like release one a week because it feels like I'm like 12 again, 11, like watching CW or like watching Charmed or something. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'll have to wait till next week. And I'll just like dream about it until then.
Yeah. I want to talk about your music.
Okay.
You released your first album in 2019, right?
2019.
I was there for the launch.
Yeah.
I remember. It was an amazing experience.
Thank you. It was an amazing experience.
What led you to releasing your first album? Because I feel like I am hesitant to call myself a musician, you know, because even though I sing, I don't really.
You're a musician.
Thank you. I don't create anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a part of me that wants to pursue music again.
Yeah.
That wants to like make my own music and maybe release it to the world. But like for you, what was it that got you to that point where you're like, I'm going to not just make music, but actually release it as this thing, as this album for other people to also witness and hear?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I want to let like you and everybody know that like, what is a musician? Like, we do have a very interesting perspective on like a musician. I think like it's a birthright to all communities, and especially like the music that represents them and the stories that are in there, like connecting with that. You're a musician, you know what I mean? And it's like it's an identity that we all can embrace. I think that we do, especially in music education in America and the West, and you know, everywhere, there's this aspect of like, you gotta train and you have to have this technique and you have to have, and then it becomes this separate identity, and maybe even the academia aspect, the accolade component, like doing whatever. That I just feel like that blocks creativity. Yeah. Because creativity, like I said, is a birthright to everyone. I think that you should sing. And also, like, what's the pressure? Like, are you a musician because you've released, you know, something? And are you a musician once that release is like, you know, 1,000 streams? Like, are you a musician once you can play at like blah, 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 blah? You know what I mean? I don't know. The bar always is raised. And I just feel like we need to like have a deeper discussion around that. Yeah. But in terms of my journey with it, I've always done music. My paternal grandparents were East Asian folk singers. Not like, they were musicians. I would call them musicians. By other standards, they were people who when they weren't farming, made money during like the off seasons by doing traveling singing in like a local, small, remote village. You know, like, are they musicians or are they just carrying oral tradition through like Chinese opera in that region? I don't know, you know, but that definitely informed. They didn't teach me those folk songs specifically, but the sound and that environment was what I grew up in. And then East Asian, like popular music. And then I definitely did a lot of like Western music. I was choir, and then I'm a classically trained violinist. And then I did, you know, teaching myself piano and guitar on the side. And
wow, okay.
I did start. Yeah. Okay. I just love music. We have a
prodigy over here.
I'm okay. I just feel it. You know what I mean? But I feel, you know, as every like Asian American in that damn county was doing, you know, if it wasn't cello, it was violin. If it was violin, it was piano. If it wasn't piano, it was something else. You know what I mean? And like, just to get into college, but not as an official career. Right. Or your like family would be like, we didn't expect you to actually take this seriously. Yeah. But seriously enough that you become one of the best in your county, but like not serious enough that you make it your life. Right. Check yourselves, Asian American, you know, Asian parents. Yeah. You silly.
Exactly. Like, you're going to have me do this thing every single day and then not expect me to pursue it.
Especially when it's like art in its essence, and for me, was a way to talk about the things that were going on. And I did start writing when I was in like puberty in middle school, because I was starting to realize I was gay and I had a lot of feelings. I grew up in a home with domestic violence. So it was a way that I could talk about things and not just hold it within me. I didn't share or release at that time. And then for a long 10 years, I really didn't release or write music, mostly out of fear, because my family didn't know I was gay. And I felt that if I was to write or release music, there was going to be obviously like gay ass motifs in there, or like I'd be using pronouns that are like, I'm talking about a man who broke my heart or whatever. Right. And that just wasn't something that I felt safe doing. When you met me in like 2018, 2019, that was around when I came out to my parents. Everyone else already knew, but like my parents and my grandparents didn't know. Right. I did that. And that's when like it just literally was like a floodgate. I also had like started dating somebody that was like my first like true love.
Yeah.
He was like my muse, and I was just like, all right for you, baby. Like
I remember this.
Yes. A lot of great music came out of that. But that's when it really like my own creations.
Yeah.
You know, before that I was just playing covers, and before that
Right.
I was just like orchestral pieces and blah, 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 blah. It was like time to actually write my own story.
Yeah.
And then from there it was like, you know, understanding like what, you know, as a Chinese Asian American person, like what genre do I like? What I'm just kind of assimilated into Western music, but then what does it mean to bring East Asian sound? And that was an exploration, you know. Like I definitely love playing lots of genres. My main ones are like American folk because I grew up in Virginia. Like I was around a lot of bluegrass, Celtic music. As a violinist too, I did a lot of like, you know, folk music as a fiddler and a violinist. And loved R&B and soul, had like the Asian part of me like tucked away somewhere. And then it was like, okay, what does it look like to actually like merge that together? You know, the use of Asian instrumentation in hip hop, in R&B, in folk, like Western folk music. Yeah. You know, using Asian based sounds and rhythm. But like, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's fun. It's like, it's who I am. Right. You know, I think we're just taught to like fragment ourselves as like, your Asian part stays here, your American part stays here. Like, exactly. And then like, but who are you as like a multitude of different things?
Multifaceted being. Yeah. And I'm going to have you sign it later, but I do
Oh my God.
I do have it. It's your first album.
Thank you.
And I remember picking this up when you did your first your album release.
29. That's from the first album release?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Your first album release at the
shout out Zoya Toe for that cover art.
I will be having you sign this.
Okay, thank you.
And one of our mutual friends was the producer on it. Shout out to Andy.
Yes.
But I really felt like on this album, I could really hear that blending of the Eastern and Western. I mean, you have, I think it was Mother Sorrow that you sang in Mandarin. And there were other songs as well where you could hear the blending of that. Seeing you grow up in like Appalachia, and you have that element of folk. You have that element of like the Chinese folk singing as well in there. I mean, Whippoorwills has that,
like the bird call.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As well as you have that like sort of bluegrass, folky kind of music on there. And then I feel like with exploring that sort of sound, Ghosts of Young Men, and I love that song so much. I think it's one of my favorites of your songs. That and Free are my top two songs of yours. I feel like Free especially just like hits this specific part in my heart. And I've told you this before about how like Free just makes me feel free. How like it makes me feel like that first feeling of when you're at the ocean and your toes are in the sand and you feel that first wave crash against you, and I'm just like, oh, I feel so alive.
Thank you for sharing that with me. I think like as an artist, it's like, thank you. Someone is actually like experiencing like the song as I experience it, performing it and writing it. Yeah. And for people who don't know that song, Free, I wrote with my best friend Danny Valentine. And we both wrote it around a time period where we were working through our own traumas, and we realized, we already knew this, but at the end of the day, these traumatic experiences happen to us, childhood, whenever. And the only person, once you're out of that environment, the only person who can really set you free is you. Of course, a good support system, you know, good people in your life, good providers, all these things. But it is this trying to empower people to realize that you can set yourself free, and that like that's what needs to happen. And then Ghost of Young Men is like my own take on my own life being raised as a man, like pretty like very masculinity driven, about providing and building and like getting a wife and stuff, all these things, right? But the concept is, I have nephews now, and like when you see them as like young boys, like they have so many dreams and so many aspirations, and even their emotional landscape can be broad. But as you grow as a man in the society, you're just taught like emotional stoicism over like expressive emotionality, like that it's like somehow more masculine to be these things. And I just like don't think those things are true out of my own experience. I think it's a lot hotter and sexier, you guys out there, if you can like embrace your own emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm really happy I got that song out.
No, I really love that song so much. And I feel like I kind of see it connected to Whippoorwills in a way, even though they're not. It's just that like you get that same sort of sound, but Ghost of Young Men is so rich. I feel you explored that sound of like you have that Appalachian folky kind of element there, and you've gone deeper into it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so rich.
We got a banjo in there.
Yeah. It's so it's just so deep, and I love it so much. It like scratches this perfect like part in my mind where I have it on repeat. Do not be surprised if you end up on my Spotify Wrapped.
I look forward to it. Send me a screenshot.
I definitely will. I feel like if you get like thousands of streams, it's probably me.
Yeah, thank you. It really means a lot. Like, it really means a lot. Like,
yeah, of course. You know, and I'm not just saying this because you're my friend, but like, your music is genuinely so good, and I want more people to listen to it. You know, especially because I feel like a lot of people can relate to it as well. You know, other Asian people, other queer Asian people. Do not make that face. You're gonna make me.
I'm gonna stop it. I'm gonna cry.
Other queer Asian people, especially like. As a queer Asian person myself, you know, we've talked about like our queer identities before and navigating that and how you bring that to your art, and also how like there have been times where we've had to sort of create a different identity for ourselves to kind of protect ourselves in a way, to see pass as straight in a way, you know, so that just as a safety thing, but undoing that and like unmasking in a way and just being authentically yourself.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's something this podcast is for me, is like being authentic and being just like myself, and also allowing other people to just exist in this
that's not
space.
Easy.
Yeah.
It's like in this world, I think it's actually kind of sometimes dangerous to do that. You're actually inviting like
exactly.
You have to face the invitation of now disapproval and you know, visible, like your visibility becomes something that you have to grapple with,
especially with social media. You know, when you post on social media, or like you can release something that is so, you know, precious to you, and you're also opening yourself up to like the piranhas on social media, the trolls, the people, everybody who has an opinion, you know, like
who cares about
scary.
Yeah, I hear you. I've had to like think a lot about that, but I've gotten to, I think, a good place of like, I really don't care.
Yeah. I'm trying to get to that place.
Yeah, you know, in a way, I think it was really tied to like my people-pleasing parts of myself as well, which is like... I'm a
recovering people-pleaser.
Right? Like everyone needs to like me, or everyone's opinion matters about me. I'm somehow... And once I dug down deep into my own perspective around it, it was like, there is a need for my self-importance to be like the focus of all of this. So there's even a little bit of ego in there. And once I kind of like, I was like, you know what? Not that important, like in an embracing kind of way, like in a gentle kind of like, I'm not important enough, like that I don't need to garner the approval of all of these people, their opinion. I'm one person. My like one art piece does not represent the the whole world.
Collective, yeah.
So if you don't like it, it's okay.
Then it's not for you.
Yeah,
exactly. Like if you don't like it, it's not for you.
Yeah,
you know, it'll find the people that it's for.
Exactly. And I've embraced that, especially as I've like been writing more about like my queer Asian experience. I'm like, I'm a minority. Guess what? My music is probably appealing mostly to the minorities. Like I didn't grow up in middle America to be like, you know, football playing, prom king, blah, 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 which is like what the culture was in, you know, rural Virginia where I grew up. And that's just not who I was growing up. So my experiences, my stories, and my sound are not going to be that. So when I create, the sounds that come out and the stories that come out are not going to be for people who that is their experience, or that's the totality of like what they want to explore in their life.
Yeah. What was it like for you? Because I mean, I love talking to other Asian people who did not grow up on the coast, you know, because I feel like East Coast East Coast Asians and West Coast Asians have very specific like experiences, you know, and I feel like a lot of the American Asian experience is like East Asian as well. So like as a South Asian, I feel like I've had a different experience.
Yes, yeah.
And also I grew up in Hawaii. So like also a very different experience. So it's very interesting to me to talk to other Asian people who did not grow up with those like experiences. Like what was like Virginia like?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I still identify as like a coastal Asian just because I was near the DC area per se. My family like worked in the DC area. Like all the educational programs were available, or like the pressure was available to me. I would just have to commute to it. But in terms of where I lived, it was definitely not coastal.
Yeah.
What was the question? What was my experience?
Like,
I mean, dear.
Just like being, you know, being Chinese American.
Yeah.
In the U.S., in Virginia.
Yeah.
Like.
So when my parents and my grandparents immigrated here, they were first in Connecticut in like the New Haven area, working in factories, getting education, all these things. We moved down to Virginia because my parents were able to work in DC. But after a certain point in time, my family's from a remote village in Hunan, and they're just not used to like a city lifestyle, all the cars, all of these things. So we moved out to a farm. And obviously in that area, the farms are available out in like rural Virginia, but still like close enough to highway that you can drive an hour and 10 or 20 into DC, whatever. So my family moved me out there. It was very isolating. I do, now as an adult reflecting on it, I think throughout my teens and 20s, I had a pretty negative perspective on it because it was just so isolating. It was not a great place for me to not only trying to figure out like my sexuality, but also my cultural identity. Like we were the first and only like Asian family in that neighborhood, not town.
Wow.
Let alone the first people of color in that town.
Damn.
So I'm still, you know, as a kid, you process all these memories, but as an adult, you can go back and be like, oh, so that's why it was like that, or like people treating me that way, or
racism.
It
always comes back to racism.
Yeah, I probably think that once my family, I was like 8 or 9 when we moved out there. I think that was one of the first times that I really started conceptualizing my racial identity. Before that, living more closer to the suburbs in Northern Virginia, there were other Asian families around. So I think I didn't think about it as much. But once I was out there, isolated, around a lot more conservative ideology, a lot more religious ideology, pretty big Protestant region with a lot of Protestants. And yeah, there were Confederate flags where I was, you know, there's a lot of separate opinions about things. Sex education was very much still in the scope of like the topics that you could not talk about were abortion, homosexuality, and masturbation. Yeah. Those were the 3 things. The first thing they did in like family life education was like those. And like that I do like 2 of those things. You know what I mean? Like what? So that experience was definitely like a negative. Yeah. The one thing I would say was I get it. Like my family wanted me to also grow up around what they were thinking like this is what we're comfortable with. But yeah, being able to be on all of that land, that privilege of being on that land, watching my grandparents and parents like work the land the way they used to, eating the vegetables that I grew up with, like the food I got to grow up with, the time I got to spend, because I was so isolated and alone, I spent a lot of time outside, just like by myself in fields of grass and trees and things. Yeah. That I think that like really helped solidify like my appreciation and my sensitivity and my music even, right? Like some of these bird calls, and that's all from my loneliness, is that like I've been connected to these aspects of nature and because they were my friends. Yeah. Like I didn't go to people's houses and hang out. Like I had friends in school, but it was such like a performative friendship, not like performative friendships. Obviously it's already performative at that age, but there's another separate performance where most of these people in this town have no idea that like I'm speaking like a dialect from a village from East Asia and South China. Like the things that I grow up, the culture I grow up with, the ideas are so far. Like just I don't, and no one has an interest to actually bridge that with me. I don't have an interest to bridge that. I actually shamed myself for having that other part of me, like you know, we have that classic story of like you bring your food to school and people are
Yeah.
like, it smells so
The
weird.
lunchbox.
The lunchbox. And it's like, it breaks my heart because now as an adult, I'm like, those are the things I want to like hold on to. You know, so good and bads, right? A lot of great mountains and plants, and you know, like I said, I grew up like being able to identify a lot of things because I just watched them grow through multiple seasons through my childhood. And
did you go to a religious school?
no, I did not.
Okay, lucky you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't go to a religious school until I moved here. I moved here when I was like 15 and a half, and then I got put into a private school after I was going to like public school for a bit. And then it was a Catholic school. And religion, the Catholic.
Was it an all-girls Catholic school?
No,
or it was
co-ed
wow.
Catholic school, yeah.
Okay.
And were you raised religiously?
No. Like, not like, how should I describe this? Not in the sense like that institutionalized, like there's a gathering place, all these things. Like we have our folk traditions, which is more of a fusion of like Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and local deities. Yeah. But even then, we don't. It's interesting because we never thought about religion as like you go to this temple or sacred grounds and you do this.
It's just a thing.
You may make like a pilgrimage to this mountain to pray to this deity, but we never labeled it religion because it just didn't fit what was told. Like these people are religious and they go to church or the mosque or like temple or you know what I mean. But I would say that I did grow up with spirituality and religion, and there's a lot of history with also like China's relationship with our own spirituality and religion and the Cultural Revolution. So I think there's a little bit of stigma around like necessarily being more embracing of your spirituality. Yeah. I think in my journey as like an adult, I've definitely embraced it and like unpack like, oh, Guanyin Pusa, like the goddess of compassion is a symbol that is in our house, but like we don't talk about it. And grandma, who did you pray to while you were going through the like this oppression and this like fear and then coming to America? And it comes out when humans are trying to find protection and meaning and support in things that they can't control. It is up to a greater cosmic power. So that's how I would define. Like, did I grow up religious? Like, no, but like I grew up with spirituality.
Yeah. Do you find that spirituality like making its way into your music as well?
Absolutely. I use like Buddhist chants in my, especially like not necessarily to invoke the spirituality, but the lesson behind it. One like I use is Guanyin Pusa's like prayer. Yeah. And it's like what I'm really trying to communicate is the lesson of compassion for others, but also the compassion for yourself. And that's more like the Taoist kind of like, what does life look like if you balanced compassion for others as much as you balance compassion for yourself? Yeah. Which I think is like a secret wisdom that I've had to unpack for myself, which is like, I love people. Great. I love people. I'm a people pleaser. Yeah. But in this moment, if I were to like sit with both sides, be like, what is the decision if I actually if I balanced what I wanted to do with also love for myself? Maybe I wouldn't stay 4 hours just out of like wanting to make other people happy, but I'm going to only stay an hour and then go take care of myself with these 3 hours. Like that's a very like logistical kind of idea. But what I'm saying is like, how do you balance love for others with like your own self-love? And I'm using the prayer and the symbolicness of this bodhisattva to like communicate that in my songs, especially ones about struggle and trying to unpack these things, or songs birthed from a blame towards like someone else wronging me. There's still like an element of compassion that can be for them and for me. Yeah exactly. Anyways, I digress. That's just like a little like, how do I use spirituality in my like nature spirituality too, is I'm looking at the symbolism of these birds and animals to talk about deeper aspects of like the human experience and relationship experience. And yeah.
I love that. And I feel that in your music. I mean, I find your music to be very healing as well. Just like, maybe it's just me, but I don't think so. I find your music to be in a way its own medicine. And the way that you blend so many different things, I'm like, this touches me in a way. And I feel like that's the goal of any artist, is just for their music to
touch somebody in some way to elicit some kind of emotion, to bring about some sort of feeling, to move people. That's the goal of any musician, and you have achieved that.
Thank you. That's my goal too, Like I never saw really that separation between music and medicine.
Yeah.
And just in my own life, like some of the most powerful thing that has helped me heal is probably music in some ways. You know what I mean? But yeah, and that's why I've always thought about like as an identity, like they're not separate.
Yeah.
They're very separate in our worlds, but they're not separate in my world.
Yeah.
And not as an existence.
Exactly.
And also they really elevate each other. Like in my own practice of music and medicine, the music that I play and the stories that people will share with me from the music side, either from musicians or from audience or fans and things like that. Sometimes they're so honest and genuine and real and wise that I can bring that into my medical practice where, it's detached, but like I can share with somebody like, I actually heard someone say this.
Yeah.
Even if it's not necessarily like my exact experience, someone said this to me. And that it's like, and then the things that I experience in medicine and the questions that come up, the universal questions that come up, fuel like my songwriting and then become something I perform. So they actually go like both ways. And I think I'm at my best when I have those two balanced. I'm really quite good at my music, like feeling one and like as a channel, like very open with my music when I'm also integrating like my medicine.
Yeah.
And I'm a better doctor when I'm playing music for sure.
And it's so funny. I was talking to Sean earlier and they were like, they shared something before about how the Chinese character for medicine comes from music, the same character from music. And I'm like, it's so interesting how so many cultures see the two as parts of each other. I mean, like in Hinduism, a lot of our chants are very musically inclined or just like are basically a form of music. So many different cultures and religions will use music as a way to heal or to connect with their ancestors or to connect with God or spirituality. And I feel like music really does have an impact on people more than people realize. I mean, if you're having a bad day and you're listening to really sad music, that can be cathartic, but also listening to music will elicit emotions, so it can very easily influence the way that your day goes as well,
Yeah, like that always brings up when I love to just sometimes discuss like what is music? What is sound? What is sound? And then how does the sound get combined together to create music? And what is like if we were kind of trying to quantify it, like what is the energetic power of music?
And it's what like makes good music.
Right. It's a frequencies. And then that vibrate through the molecules in the air. But for some reason, it can transport us somewhere. It can like transcend time as something we like preserve. And the stories and history, it can help people. And I'm going to use the word channel because I believe in it. Like channel the spirituality. Like it's outside dimension and space. So like what is that? You know what I mean? It's something so, I don't know, beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's just because like our little eardrums are like tympanically like,
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Just feeling it. Just feeling like all the frequencies and the motions and the sound, the passion, the soul.
The soul.
How many buzzwords can I throw out there?
Exactly. Just throw them all in there.
Yeah.
With your music, who would you say your biggest influences are? If you have any.
I had like so many. I would say like the big groups. More recently, definitely like Leanne La Havas.
Okay,
I just like
love
listen
her.
to Leanne La Havas and I'm just like, wow, you are giving something so you. And so the messages and the love and like the lessons. So powerful. Definitely growing up, like in terms of East Asian music, like Jay Chow. That's a big one,
Jay
right?
Chow. Oh
I
my
don't know,
God.
like, and then a bunch of like the 80s, Teresa Tang, like all these things. And then like I was definitely like powerhouse ballad American, like Black women, like the Whitney Houston and like even Mariah Carey. And then some of like Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday, and just people, for me, I think connecting with music in America and inspiration, like for me, it's definitely like from the Black diaspora, like African diasporic music. Not only that, but the journey through oppression. It's like as a kid growing up in rural Virginia, I was seeking out on like understanding and connection, and like someone else is experiencing something that I am.
Yeah.
And when you're looking for people, like words that have already been written about liberation and freedom, it is going to be Black Americans.
Yeah.
And so much of the foundation of folk music, rock music, jazz, it's Black American diasporic music.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I think that growing up, those were huge inspirations for me, because it's someone had already laid the groundwork and a kind of sound that was like teaching me, and I'm still connecting with it as I'm trying to figure out like what does my music mean in terms of liberation work, you know? So there's that. And then I have a lot more, all kinds of musicians that like, I listen to all kinds of music. So I don't know. No. Yeah, lots of inspiration.
Love that.
Yeah, I love all kinds of genres of music.
Maybe
not classical. I'm too traumatized to listen to classical music anymore. I'm like, I don't really care about this Austrian, German, French, like this 1700, this aria, this Baroque piece. Like, I'm just done enough of it.
Yeah.
I'm done. Yeah.
I know. I still have some trauma from doing operetta.
Same. Yeah, I was classically trained, so I'm just like, I don't really connect with what you're saying.
Yeah. I am also the same when it comes to music, about like listening to different genres. For me, music is music. It doesn't matter what language it's in, you know, where it's from, just as long as I feel moved. And sometimes I don't even need to know what the lyrics are saying to feel moved by something. And then later I read the lyrics and I'm like even more moved, you know, or I'm like, oh yeah, I can feel these words. And it's so amazing the way that like music can transcend barriers and language. And I mean, I'm a huge BTS fan. ARMY, OG ARMY.
Yeah.
Okay. Pre-debut ARMY.
Pre-debut ARMY,
I'm
wow.
OG. But, you know, like members of BTS have said so many times about how, you know, for them, music transcends language, how it transcends these barriers and things like that. And it's so amazing seeing quote unquote foreign artists now becoming more popular in the US. You know, K-pop has become a huge thing in the US, but also
and K-pop is building off of American Black diasporic hip-hop. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also really great seeing South Asian musicians starting to pop up more, and we're seeing like Middle Eastern musicians, like you know.
I guess that is the beauty of like TikTok and streaming and globalized.
But no, like especially I feel like South Asians are starting to get our time now, like slowly. We're not quite there yet, but we're building towards that, you know, whether it be in the acting
space. Exactly. South Asian music is so good.
South Asian music is so good.
And it's represented the diaspora, like the bridge between like South Asia in terms of like India, the Middle East, and also then like East Asia, because the Silk Road was around for a much longer than America was around. So there's been already, and like you can see it through the spirituality too. Like,
I mean, Buddhism and Hinduism are both dharmic faiths. Yeah. You know, they're both very connected. I mean, Siddhartha, the first Buddha, he was an Indian prince, or Nepal, I believe.
That like it moved like through the Bhutan, Nepal, Himalayan routes and Tibet into the rest of Asia. So like you see, you can literally map out like how the diaspora occurred and what religious symbology was like passed. And then you even see like when it got to like my village or like the rest of East Asia, Avalokiteshvara, which was the Bodhisattva of Passion, who was a male, became a goddess. Yeah. And that goddess can present as like different genders and ages and became more of a deity. Like, but they are the same. And then how it moved then to like Japan, like it's all interconnected. And so is the music then, and so is the rhythms, and so is the intention. Like, I think it's beautiful. But we need to. I feel like there needs to be space to like share all of that and see it as one, you know, one picture. Yeah. Rather than like, oh, you're Asian. Okay, like what does that mean? What does that mean?
Oh my gosh, this is also part of my beef with like AAPI month. Because like first we're blending Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders together, and I mean many Pacific Islanders do have Asian heritage as well, but it's like we all still have different you know, heritages and experiences. But with AAPI month as well, on the one hand I am happy that, you know, we get this acknowledgement or this space, and like, you know, same with like ACN, things like that. But it's making us like a monolith, like like Chinese people are different than Korean people. Korean people are different than Japanese people, who are different than Indian people, who are different than like, you know, Nepali people, who are like, you know, we all have like so many different identities. But when we just color it with this brush of, oh, you're all Asian, like what does that mean?
Right.
You know?
And it's still underneath like the Western central like idea of what Asia is, which is like, you're Chinese. Like,
Orientalism.
or Orientalism, exactly. And so even in these spaces, we're seeing, you know, when you call it like an Asian performance space, you need to be very cognizant of, like, at least in my opinion, as someone who's trying to build this community, to have South Asian like performers and to bring that, because if not, it can be really predominantly East Asian. And everyone who's coming to see it assigns, you know, you gotta watch out how like our own brains are brainwashed by like, oh, when we think like Asia, we think this. You know what I mean?
I think that's been one of my issues with a lot of Asian spaces that I've been in, especially like other like Asian creative spaces, not simply just ACN, but like other spaces as well, where I've always felt like not Asian enough.
Right.
In a way, because, or not the right type of Asian.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, because it's like, I'm South Asian, so what I belong to, don't I? Like,
you do,
I remember,
and yet it doesn't feel that way.
Exactly.
Right?
Like I remember at university, I joined an Asian club, and there was this one guy who was like, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "Isn't this the Asian club?" And he was like, "Yeah, but," I'm like, "I'm South Asian," and he's like, "Oh."
Yeah.
Okay.
Which also brings up like a kind of funny, like I do a lot of digging, like just anthropological digging, and like we've also monolith homogenized within history, even colonization, pre-colonization of our cultural identities too. And there are so many tribal groups, there are so many nomadic groups.
Exactly.
And there's so much migration, and like it's really funny to me that we think that we can tell what somebody is by how they look, which might be true in some senses, but I think once you actually engage with just how there's diversity there is within the Asian, and then within East Asia itself, like, I don't know, it's just frustrating. I'm just in terms of colorism, in terms of like all of it.
Exactly. And I mean,
jewelry to clothes to religious practice too. You know, when we're talking about China, we're talking about like Uyghur Muslims, we're talking about, you know, Tibet, Mongolia, we're talking about Southeast Asia, the like mountain nomadic, like the nomadic tribes that are in Yunnan. And then how they are actually like outside the binary in sense of what their identity is in terms of their bridge between like East Asia and then South Asia, you know?
I mean, it's the same thing in South Asia. It's so
Sorry,
dumb.
I'm not saying people are dumb. I just think people are shallow or they don't think enough or critical enough.
It's the same thing in South Asia where, you know, okay, a person can be Indian, right? You have a North Indian and you have a South Indian. They might both be Hindu, but they practice Hinduism differently. They have different languages. People also don't realize that Indian is not a language. Like when people ask me, oh, do you speak Indian? I'm like, which Indian language? Which one? I speak 4. Which one do you want to hear? You know, like I know somebody whose parents have to speak to each other in English because they speak 2 different Indian languages, you know? So it's like, people don't understand there's so many different tribal groups, so many different ethnic groups. I'm from 2 different ethnic groups, you know, and with their own languages, their own customs, their own cultures. And I mean, back to the point of religion is also practiced differently depending on what ethnic group you're from or what part you're from. I mean, there might be a foundation that ties people together, but you'll see like a lot of Nepali Hindus practicing Hinduism in a different way than, let's say, Punjabi Hindus, or different than like Tamil Hindus, or like different than Thai Hindus, you know, or like different than like Indonesian Hindus, or like even different than Pakistani Hindus, you know? So it's
and it's so interesting because in America, like I always like use this as a metaphor. It's different, but we like think about people forget the geographical size too, and the geographical differences. But you can already see it in America. Like people are like, I'm Floridian. I'm not from Seattle. Like I'm a New Yorker. I'm not from Arizona. Like those are vastly different places and corners of America. But we can see the diversity and like the appreciation of our differences in that way. But we can't see it when it comes to like minority, like our assigned minority populations. Yeah. And our ethnicity like box is just Hispanic, non-Hispanic. Yeah. Yep. Like, I'm like, oh, there's an ethnicity like checkbox. Oh, it's just Hispanic, non-Hispanic. Yeah. I'm like, definitely wasn't a person of my like color who like came up with that idea. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is exciting. No, it's a very like Hispanic or not Hispanic checkbox.
Exactly. And going back to music, connecting to this topic of, just like cultural background and things like that, do you find it hard for you as like one, as an independent artist, but also as like a Chinese American artist, like I guess like marketing yourself or like finding your audience?
Yes. I think the internal journey came first, which was like, well, you have to belong to a genre, right? Like the world of genre in music. Oh my God, Beyonce's releasing a country album. Like, you know what I mean? Like people have created a structure, like people, like white Americans in the music industry have created these genres, these awards that are based in like genres that then are based also in some control of like who can make it and who has the look for it and the marketability to the demographic that listens to that music. And it's just like, yeah. And for me internally, I had to kind of be like, well, like I don't want to just be like a singer-songwriter that just does acoustic guitar. And after like my experience with it, and then we can talk about So Far Sounds. Yeah. I'm ready to dish the details. But you're in that scene and it just, the type of audience that's drawn to it, like you can only talk about it so much. And you're, singer-songwriter like venues, and it's predominantly not queer people of color or people of color in general. You do folk music or country music, it's also something you have to grapple with. Bringing out East Asian sound, that becomes like, what is this? Are you world music? Are you something that like, someone plays at a yoga studio now? Like, or can it be something that's actually popularized, accessible music? It's difficult, I think. Like, specifically, I was doing the acoustic music scene, DIY. The main place, the main like organization I worked with is probably So Far Sounds. I've done like probably 30 plus shows with them at this point, not like high 30s, like 30s. But those, there's a certain kind of setup, there's a certain expectation of what kind of music you can do, the sound engineering, the venue spaces, the audience, right? Because of just pricing and accessibility. The type of people who are coming are in New York City specifically too. If you look at the crowd, it's mostly like young professionals who can pay like $20, $30 to have a cute date and listen to like singer-songwriter music. And that is, in my opinion, in my observation, the majority of it. And I've met rappers and hip hop artists who are part of So Far Sound. These are like discussions I have with other artists, and it's like, no, this is not the crowd to like, and maybe not even the right setting, right? You're in this like small little cafe, and it's not suited towards your genre. You don't get many follows from it because people, this audience, the majority of this audience is not someone who is going to follow this type of music, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it is difficult to navigate. I think it's difficult to, and especially when I've played in other parts of the country as well, singing a different language. Sometimes it's not about actually engaging with the message. It's more about just like, oh, wow, you're singing a different language, but like, where is it from? Where are you from? And like, it'd be great if the majority of those interactions was like, oh, wow, I want to like know more. Like, what part, da, 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 da. But oftentimes those conversations are by an older generation of like white Americans, and then they just want to tell you about their experience with your culture. Whether it be like traveled there, I knew somebody who's like from that region who like showed me this, but they're like obviously like 2,000 miles away from like where your family's from, and you're like, great, thanks, thank you.
They always want to be like, yeah, I just was at a trip there.
Yeah,
it's like, okay.
And so the give and receive isn't there. Like coming to New York and now doing a lot of like building my own like performance spaces and trying to cultivate that space for other artists who might feel that same way. It's much more rewarding because you're playing for your people.
Yeah,
you're playing for people who understand this, like the journey that you took in America. And so there's a different kind of engagement and validation, like per this conversation even, right?
Yeah.
You were able to like let me know this like really meant something to you versus like someone coming up and just being like, oh, that was pretty. What kind of sounds were you making?
Yeah.
What kind of language were you speaking?
I want to ask you about So Far Sounds.
Yes.
Because you've done a bunch of performances with So Far Sounds, and so many like big artists. I mean, Yeba has done So Far Sounds. So like, what is going on there?
Okay, so the tea is, so I guess the most recent thing that happened was the sound engineers in New York City of So Far Sounds, they've known that essentially for the work that they were doing, they were being extremely underpaid. They did a like market analysis, found out, I don't know the exact percentage, but they were being paid hundreds of percents lower. I mean, like hundreds of percents lower than what is industry standard for their 2 hour, pretty much 2 or 3 hour, 3 artist set where they have to engineer. So the audio engineers brought their concerns to So Far Sounds, and So Far Sounds made a decision to let them go rather than pay them and realize that they are operating, in my opinion, and I'll get into the artist side because this opinion is not based on just what the audio engineers are going through, like that they're being unfair, that they've lost sight of their mission statement. So now rewind, I started doing So Far Sounds in like 2018, 2019, around the same time I released that album. The first video I ever saw of So Far Sounds was Yeba, and it was like a huge musical goal for me. I was like, my dream would be to play a So Far Sound.
Yeah.
And to like achieve that and be able to play in the spaces that I know that these artists are playing. Boston was the first person to give me an opportunity. New York, I think, was already too saturated by that time for them to even like listen to my audition tapes or whatever that I uploaded. So I started doing that. And at the beginning, it was really, really beautiful. It was still mostly all volunteer run. Each city had their volunteer team. So no one was being paid. They just did it because of the love of music. Their venues were smaller, like small businesses, private businesses, and people's homes.
Yeah.
So Far Sounds was started in the UK, and So Far Sounds stands for Songs from a Room. So the story was this group of people started this nonprofit because they were at these shows at a bar and people were just talking more so than listening to music. So they're like, how do we create a more intimate music scene that allows the artists to really share what they're doing? And so that's what they started. They expanded into multiple different countries, again, volunteer-based. And so as an artist, I was forming relationships with the team that was actually in the city. And they were our advocates. There was so much more just like presence and less burnout, in that opinion. We were being paid $100 flat. Each artist played $100 flat. At that time, there was less audio engineering. There were a lot more straight up acoustic shows where there was no amplification. You just bring an acoustic instrument and you play. Fast forward through COVID, the So Far Sounds team dissolved a lot of the volunteer kind of structure. Past COVID, they got some more hired positions. It was like one person doing the booking for things. They automated their booking rather than you contacting the booker specifically for that town or that city. And pay stayed the same, 100. So there already is you're trying to submit to a algorithm or computer to then like book a show. And even though you've done like multiple shows, no one's getting back to you, kind of a thing. Becomes very difficult. Their ticket prices, I believe at one point they were like $18 if around there. And they're now like $28 and then plus taxes like $30.
Wow.
So they've essentially increased their tickets. They've also they had a CEO change during the post-COVID period. And the CEO, I think, took So Far Sounds in a direction. It went a little bit more corporate. So now there's an audio engineer at each of these shows. They're starting to book more corporate spaces, hotel lobbies, larger spaces. There was then a change in the pay of artists, saying that like standard shows, $100. I don't know the exact, it became a tiered system. So if you were able to play for like 50 or 70 plus people or whatever, you get like a $30 to $50 pay bump, which is stupid So Far Sounds, because you obviously don't know what like having a full band means, because you really only can book those shows if you have a full band, because it's like So Far Sounds Loud or whatever name they gave it. So you have to kind of like be like, I have a full band. The pay increase is not enough to cover a band. Right. But you're expecting artists to like now show up and be paid. You're going to pay what? Each of your band members like
$10,
10, 15, $20. You know what I mean? If that. So it's just like the whole structure changed. Yeah. And the pay really didn't increase. And also you're not, as the artist, you're not choosing what show you play. You don't know how big the room is really. Right. You're being offered a show and you say yes or no. So there's no control on the artist to be like, I want to play a bigger show. You know, and then you have to get a band, and like if you want to play the show, you have to like directly let them know that you can play bigger you know, it's just so I don't know. Yeah. And then knowing the sound engineers and like what they've been going through. I know that recently they actually, So Far Sounds said that they'll increase the rate or whatever, and it's not by much. And there's, you know, hearsay and like the social media world of what they were asking. They were trying to contract other sound engineers and in the city, and the sound engineers were like, it's ridiculous what they're offering. This is so under like industry standard. Yeah. And it becomes like, we need to talk about it. Yeah. Like, wasn't this supposed to be like community based, that we're just, I don't know. And they do offer a good opportunity, right? As an artist, you show up, you don't have to book the room, you can sell all your merch, you can maybe get some following, but it's just not for me anymore.
It's hard when you have like, on the one hand, they can really help your career, you know, that exposure that So Far Sounds gives. But then at the same time, it is frustrating to hear that like there's all these like issues with paying the engineers and also paying the artists. Like, pay your artists.
Yeah, and it's so saturated now. What I see is they've been trying to make more and more and more money. They've increased the number of shows, right? But your staff is not that big. So now the staff has to like play multiple shows. The audio engineers have to go to multiple shows. So Far Sounds is making more money off of these $30 tickets, but it's not going back to the hands of like the artists and the engineers.
Capitalism strikes again.
Yeah. And I think that's what happened. They like lost sight of their mission. Yeah. And I stand by that statement, So Far Sounds. I'm just a little artist over here.
Speaking of being an artist, I have one last question for you, which is for anybody who wants to be an artist, you know, who feels like they have this music in them that they want to get out, you know, or who wants to make music but doesn't know where to start, or doesn't consider themselves a musician, or doesn't know like, you know, how to even navigate the thought of being a musician or calling themselves one. Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody who is at like that, not even at the beginning mark, you know, is at like the beginning, you know? What advice could you give to somebody?
You know, and the advice that I'm giving is stuff that I still need to reflect on, and I still always come back to. So this is advice that like, just if you're taking this journey, you'll always kind of come back to it, which is I'm always reminding myself why I'm doing it, why I fell in love with it in the first place. You know, the first time I like sang some words and felt it in my heart, or however it might be, like always maintain that, like that purity of the relationship you have, or try to nurture that purity and come back to it and tend to it like a garden. Like always come back to it, weed it, because at the end of the day, it's so easy to forget that, right? Like there have been so many moments in my life where I'm practicing and I'm like, oh shit, when I close my eyes, all I'm thinking about is how I'm perceived. Yeah. Which takes you away from the presence of just being with your music, right? Even this question of like, oh, releasing, like, that's about other people listening. And then it becomes a question of like, how are you viewed? But really starting the place of like, what do you want to say? Why are you saying it? And for me too, advice is don't try and think that far. Just perform, like sing for yourself. Sing for your damn self, and then share with the people closest to you. And there's no expectation to go wherever you want to go from there. If you want to do it and you have a desire to do it and there's fear, take a look at that fear and then do it anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, process why there's that fear. Talk to your friends, talk to your closest confidant about it, and try to move past the illusion of good and bad. I would give all of that advice, but the main thing is maintaining the purity of your relationship with music, because it's so easy to lose that as you engage with the process, like from step one. You'll start like singing, and then you'll be like, oh my God, like this must sound so terrible to other people, and exactly. It's like, okay, keep going. You know what I mean? And then in terms of the actual doing of it, it's really just like sitting down and doing it. If it's you're working on lyrics, like journal, write, circle the things that really mean a lot to you. If it means like music, like actual melodic music, like playing it, recording it for yourself, listening to it, And like you said, my music feels and sounds like a healing tool, because it really was that way for me. Like I sang some of these songs before they were ever released or out there, and the only person who ever heard them was me. Alone somewhere, just playing to myself. And I still do that. Like when I'm feeling a certain way, I'll pull out my guitar, play these songs for myself. And free yourself. If you want to like sing it loud, like do it. Like we
take up that space.
Yeah, take up that space. Sing it with your chest, because it's exhausting. Like shackle it. Like it almost feels like there's like. Have you seen those fruits in Japan where they grow them in a little cave, so the watermelon becomes a square? It's like you are mentally like screwing like a mold around yourself and saying that you aren't allowed past these boundaries. And it's like, what does that feel like if you dance past those boundaries? And especially because you want to, and it feels safe too. What does it mean to like sing louder past those boundaries? And it's like, just do it. I want to see that. Like, you know what I mean? If there's anybody, if you're looking for validation or someone to sign your permission slip, like, I'm here. Here you go. Permission slip signed. Go. You know what I mean? Sometimes we just need that validation as well. And it's okay to like want validation as an artist. Like I would not be here if I didn't have my friends, my artist friends, my musician friends, like validating me and being like, Frank, yes, like this is good and like sounds really good and touches me, and like please release it, go do it,
That's the advice I needed, actually. That was just a disguise for other people. Actually, it was for me.
Yes, Sapna. Sing it. Do it for yourself. Just like, it's, there's a concept in Zen Buddhism, which is like, when we meditate, like what are we trying to achieve? And it's actually the achievement is to just engage in whatever shape or form. So every time you do sing, like that's it, period. Sing.
Sing it, girl.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like we could talk forever.
I know.
But I just wanted to say thank you for being here.
You're very welcome.
I love you so much. Thank you for being here, for sharing your advice and your experience. And it means so much to me. Your friendship means so much to me.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Same. Glad I didn't cry.
No, I was so close to crying so many times.
I also I aggressively want to cry at like every show and everything, because I'm just like, I'm here to show you that like crying in public is okay.
Yeah.
The show keeps going, but you're gonna see me cry.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And for everybody who's listening, thank you so much for listening or for watching. And stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Yay!
No, stop! Stop now. I want to say thank you for always supporting